Salvete discipuli. Today's lesson is taken from Chapter 8 in Latin for the New Millennium, and we're going to start a new conjugation of verbs. Now, remember, this word conjugation refers to a set of verbs that all follow the same pattern. So far, you guys have learned the first conjugation and the second conjugation, and the two of those follow a very similar pattern. In fact, they essentially follow the same pattern. It's just that when you get the present stem, they have a different vowel on the end. So let's remind ourselves about this. You can tell what conjugation a verb is in, what set of patterns it follows, based on the second principal part, right? All first conjugation verbs end in ARE. Second conjugation verbs end in ERE with the macron. That's a very important macron because third conjugation verbs end in an ERE with no macron, right? Basically, to get the present stem for first and second conjugation verbs, you just remove the RE from the second principal part, and then you have that vowel on the end of the present stem, and that's really the only difference between a first conjugation verb and a second conjugation verb. Well, third conjugation verbs follow a pretty different pattern than first and second conjugation verbs. So you've got to now learn a new pattern. And I don't necessarily mean new endings, I just mean a new pattern on how to form third conjugation verbs. And here's the first difference you're going to see between the third and the first second. To get the present stem for third conjugation verbs, you have to remove the entire ERE ending from the second principal part. And what that means then is that your present stem is not going to have a vowel on the end of it. Okay, so you are going to have to supply the vowel, and that's a major difference between first, second conjugation verbs and third conjugation verbs. Now, you add a vowel, an I for the most part, or a U for the present tense, and for the future you're going to have to change the vowel, so that's also a little bit different. But we're not talking about the future today, I just want to let you know it's only a vowel change. To conjugate conjugate third conjugation verbs, in the present active indicative, the first person singular present active indicative is always the first principal part of the verb. To be able to conjugate the rest, you need the present stem. You need to add the vowel I in the second and third person singular, first and second person plural, a U for the third person plural, and then you just add your personal endings that you already know. ST, mustus, nt. That's not that big of a deal. The present active infinitive is the second principal part, just like it is for first, second conjugation verbs. In the passive, the pattern is somewhat similar, but again, a little bit different. First principal part plus an R for the first person singular present passive indicative. After that, you need the present stem. And again, now that your present stem for third conjugation verbs do not have a vowel on the end of it, you need to supply the vowel. Now, for a reason that makes sense linguistically, but I'm not going to bother to have you learn, the second person singular, instead of supplying an I, you have to supply an E, and then add your personal ending ris, okay? But then for the third singular, first and second plural, you supply the I, and then ter, mer, and many. And then for the third person plural, you add the U, just like you do for the active, by the way, and then you're ending ntor, okay? And the present passive infinitive, this is another pretty significant difference between first, second conjugation verbs and a third conjugation verb. To get the present passive infinitive, you have to remove the entire ERE from the second principal part and then replace it with an I. So instead of just replacing that final E like you do for first conjugation and second conjugation present passive infinitive, you have to remove the entire ERE and replace it with an I. Okay, so the only thing left to do now is to do a paradigm, an example of the third conjugation verbs, okay? So our paradigm verb is going to be peto, petera, petivi, petitum, which means to seek. Now, if we follow the directions, so we follow the rule on how to get the present stem for a third conjugation verb, we remove the entire ERE from the second principal part, which gives us a present stem of pet, okay? That means our first person singular present active indicative is still the first principal part, but then we need this present stem pet For the second, third singular, first, second, and third plural. Look at your notes and see and follow along at how we form these. For the second and third singular, first and second plural, we add the I and then the personal endings. And then for the third person plural, we add the you in the personal ending, okay? And what that leaves us with is petto, petus, petit, petimus, petitus, petunt, okay? Our present active infinitive is the second principal part, so just peteret, and this all means to seek, okay? Now, forming the present passive, again, the first person singular present passive indicative is the first principal part plus the R. For the rest of the in present passive indicative, we need our present stem pet, okay? We then add the vowel that we need. Now, in the present passive indicative for the third conjugation, instead of an I, you add an E, and then your personal passive ending, ris. For the third singular, first and second plural, you add the I plus the personal endings, tor, mer, many. And then for the third person plural, you add the U plus the ending, the personal ending, untor, okay? Which gives you petor, peteris, petitor, petimor, petimini, petuntor. Okay. Now, to get the present passive infinitive, you have to remove the entire ERE and replace it with an I, which gives you peti, which means to be sought. Okay. All right. Make sure that you've taken very good notes on this. We will go over this in class tomorrow, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Walete.